Back to the testing. We had some issues on the last stream. What's up, Pharaoh Man? Is this over or just starting? It's a good question. In some ways, it's over. In some ways, it's just beginning. Yeah, I was streaming earlier and having some issues, specifically in this section right here on John's game, Mavericks Baghdad Extraction. This is an NES game. I'm playing it. I have a Famicom cartridge of this, and I'm playing it on my Sharp Twin Famicom, my actual console. This console is not modified, so the best video it gets out is composite video. So I'm sending that composite video through my original old school retro tank into my capture card, and I was dropping a ridiculous amount of frames in this section here. And in another game I tested, Shadow of the Ninja, where there was a bunch of rain and stuff, one of the guys suggested to try that, and it was the same problem. As soon as all the stuff started moving on screen, it just started dropping frames like nuts, like just crazy drop frames. Crazy drop frames. I tried all kinds of stuff to fix this, and I was not having any luck, but I think I found a solution. It's not dropping any frames now. It quit dropping frames. And what I wasn't sure about, I didn't know what was causing this, like what was the issue, but I now know, I think I know. At this moment, I'm pretty sure I know how to fix the problem, because it seems to be fixed. So, yeah. So the issue is related to capturing composite video. When you capture composite video, it's a very noisy signal. And because it's a noisy signal, you get a lot of tiny little pixels moving, doing weird stuff on the screen. And it seems to take a lot more processing power to do a capture when that kind of thing is happening on the screen. Which is very bizarre, because I capture games all the time that are 1080p, new games, for modern consoles, racing games, the Fallout games, like whatever. And there's like everything on the screen is moving. But for some reason, I don't have this problem with those. And I am having this problem with this. Very bizarre. But anyway, what I figured out is, and this won't be a problem for this particular type. Okay, let me just say what I figured out. If I change the capture from 1080p to 720p, I can still stream at 1080p. I keep my stream at 1080p, so that doesn't change. But if I change the capture of the game itself to 720p instead of 1080p, it's using way less power to do that. And so I don't seem to have any problems, and I can keep my bit rate and all my streaming stuff as high as I want it without having to try to change any of that, because that didn't affect it anyway. But if I change the actual capture from 1080p to 720p, I can still do 60 frames per second, but that definitely seems to use a lot less CPU power. I tried using different codecs for the capture. Luke had suggested using X264, and that was this little computer that I'm using for this did not like that. It went from 20 something percent CPU to like 80 something percent, and I was dropping like every single frame being generated. So that didn't work. But now that I've switched this to capture at 720, I'm actually only using about between 18 and 19 on the CPU, and that's on this screen, which was the screen that I was having the problems, and it does not seem to be a problem now. It seems to be fine now. I don't seem to have any drop frames of any kind. Even when the weird pixel stuff starts to happen, it seems to be fine. So hopefully that solves the problem. My 45-year-old eyes can't tell the difference between 1080 and 720. Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you're capturing old games like this, there's actually not a difference. Like, because the games are like, this is an NES game, it's 240p. It's so low of res. As long as you can keep 60 frames, it's it's really not going to be a difference, you know. And in fact, the main difference you would get capturing at 1080p versus 720p is you would pick up the tiny little extra detail, which is actually what I don't want, because that tiny little extra detail is noise. It's actually not the game. So I don't know why I was even capturing at 1080p for this old stuff, you know, through Composite. I don't have this problem if I'm capturing games through RGB or S-Video, because they don't have noise like a Composite signal has. So I just don't have this problem. But it is a problem, apparently, at least with the hardware that I'm using for capturing like NES games or whatever, Composite stuff. And the NES stuff, like I said, through my top loader, which is RGB modded, I don't have this happen at all. So I was kind of frustrated because I couldn't figure out what was going on, but it seems like I've figured out what the problem is. Because like right now I'm at 17%. It was at 16 just a second ago. It's back to 16 on the CPU. So it's definitely doing better. And I have not had a single drop frame. And this is the screen that I was having the problem. We're going to switch over. Let me switch over to that other game that I was testing this with. Shadow of the Ninja. Where there's like all this rain and stuff on the screen. And then that was another spot that I was having this happen. What I need to do just to thoroughly test and make sure this is accurate is switch with my camera on also. Yeah, I need to have, everything on the screen happening, and then I can really see what the CPU usage is going to be and if this is going to be a problem. What's up, Pierre? Oh, the horror show continued. Yep. Okay, it's better now. Yeah, I think I figured it out, Pierre. I think I figured out what I needed to do, but I'm just testing it right now to see. All right, so here's the screen. So let's see what happens. I'm going to let it do its thing for a bit. I'm going to keep my camera going. I'm going to keep the capture going because there's a lot of CPU usage. I'm still only sitting at 22%. I have not had a single drop frame. The change that I made, Pierre, was I changed my capture to 720p. We're still streaming at 1080p, but for the capture itself, I changed to 720. That, I think, was enough to fix the problem. Got to go to the grocery store. Gonna miss the stream. I have to catch the next one. Love the channel. Thanks, dude. Thank you. Thank you, Farrah, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm just testing this right now is all I'm doing. I haven't had a single drop frame since I made this change. It seems to be fixed. Papa Pete, what are you using for Composite to HDMI converter? Well, right now I'm using my original RetroTink. In the other room, I have the RetroTink 5, whatever it is, the better one. But this is the I have two different RetroTinks in there. This is the original. And it's fine. It's not a, you know, for doing Composite, it doesn't matter really. And it seems to handle the signal is, you know, pretty good. But the Composite signal is just a noisy signal. Do you have an Elgato? No, this is like a pretty cheap capture card in here. And in the other room, I have an AverMedia, whatever it's called, mini. I can't remember the name of it. I used to have Elgatos, but I did not have good luck with Elgatos. I actually gave the last one I had to my daughter. I just don't like Elgatos. I don't think they're as good as everybody says they are. I had a lot of problems with them. Papa Pete, I had many issues until I went RetroTink. Cheap Amazon ones suck. Yeah, well, I'm using a RetroTink right now. I'm just capturing with like a cheap little capture card. It's been fine, and it is fine. It's just, for some reason, I haven't really tried to capture Composite stuff with this card in here. I do Composite stuff in the other room all the time with the AverMedia. You know, every time I play in television, that's always Composite. you know, my ColecoVision always been composite, so I never had that problem in there. But the NES composite, for some reason, on certain games, when there's certain things happening on the screen where there's a lot of movement, that seems to be what's triggering this issue. So it's kind of a very specific, strange issue. But changing it to 720p on the capture seems to fix the problem. I haven't dropped a single frame the whole time I've been doing this test. I'm going to go back and check John's game one more time. Because that was where I was having more of the issue. Last time just a second ago when I was checking it, I forgot to bring my webcam up while I was testing. And I want to have that going while I do the test, because I want to make sure I'm loading the CPU as much as possible for what I'm going to be streaming and stuff like that. Yeah, this is just the old original RetroTink that I'm using in here. And in the other room, when I do composite stuff, I use the RetroTink 2X Pro. And then when I do anything beyond that, I'm using the other RetroTink, the 5X or whatever it's called. The really nice one. I don't have the 4K. I don't think it's necessary. You know, I think the 4K is kind of like overkill. But anyway, strange situation. So this has always been, I didn't have no issues here, never had no problems. The issue is when I go into this bunker right here. I go in here, because of the pattern on the floor, it's something, you know, the pattern has got a lot of detail, and the signal from the composite was causing a flickery kind of thing to happen when I had it 1080p. And it's still doing it a little bit at 720p, but nowhere near what it was trying to do with 1080p. And it seems to now fix the issue. I have not dropped a frame. I haven't dropped one single frame since I made this change. So that seems to be the solution to my problem. Yeah, I was trying all kinds of stuff because I didn't know. I was trying to figure out where the problem was, you know. So I was testing stuff on the upload side and on the bitrate side and the codec side and all kinds of different things. And then I sort of figured out that the problem seemed to be related to the actual capture card and what was happening on the screen. And once I identified that, and we were able to figure out, like, it was only happening, I was dropping shit tons of frames, but it was only happening at this specific spot in this game. Then we tested that other game and saw with all the stuff moving on screen, it was happening with that too. And I was like, aha. So this is related to the capture, and it's related to composite capture, because this doesn't happen with anything else, with any other kind of capture, whether it's from direct HDMI, on modern games or RGB or nothing. It's just composite. So the issue had to be related to noise in the signal. The capture card was working too hard trying to process noise. So anyway, switching it from 1080p to 720p seems to have solved that. And these are NES games. They don't need to be captured at 1080p anyway. But just to see for sure, I want to prove this to myself. I want to know for sure. So just to see for sure, what I'm going to try to do is switch the capture back to 1080p and see what happens. So let me bring this back up and bring this back to 1080p. And I got to change the size and position and everything on the screen. Yeah, there we go. And I am dropping frames like crazy again. It's dropping the frames like it was. Okay? So I don't know if you can still hear me or see anything. It's probably all choppy on the screen because that's happening. Okay, I'm just going to let it sit for a minute doing this, and then I'm going to switch it back. And the CPU usage has not gone up too much. It's really not crapping out CPU usage. It's just something about that is causing it to drop tons of frames. Okay, well, that's good to know. It's got to be related to the actual processing in the capture card then, not the CPU usage. Okie doke. Interesting. Okay, so now we'll switch it back to 720p on the capture. And we'll bring that back to the right position. And I'll hit reset on the stats. And now we are no longer dropping frames again. We're back to not dropping any frames. Well, I think that proves that was the issue. So I feel pretty confident that that's resolved the problem. So if I'm going to capture from Composite, I just need to make sure I change the capture to 720 instead of 1080p. Tricone, we're back. Is this deja vu? Yes, you're using Composite. Yeah, the Sharp Twin Famicom I have only has Composite output. It's not modded or anything. And that's the issue. I don't normally do that. I don't normally capture from Composite because it is such a bad signal. But the funny thing about it, if you try to capture Composite from an NES or from this anyway, from the Sharp Twin at 1080p, then it's trying to capture all the noise that it picks up at 1080p. So changing it to 720p has reduced the amount of picture being captured, but since it's such a low resolution anyway, because it's NES, that's not an issue. And in fact, I'm capturing less noise, which is the real issue. So now I still have not dropped any frames since I switched it back to 720. Luke says, if your canvas is set to 1080p, it still captures stream at 1080p, but you can change the capture card to 720 and still output at 10. Yes, that's what I'm doing, Luke. We're still broadcasting, streaming at 1080p for the output. That's not being changed. The only thing being changed is the capture resolution for the game. It's not related to anything having to do with the output. It's the input. I know that makes no sense, but a lot of what I do has my capture card at 720, but it still says, yes, that's absolutely excellent point, Luke. Yep. And yeah, it's funny because, I mean, my camera is 1080p. Even though it's small on the screen right now, it's still being captured at 1080p. The game was at 1080p as well, but now I've changed it to 720. The camera, no problem, right? Camera, no problem. They're both running at the same time. No problem. The problem was that when you capture composite video from this console, there are certain games where, because of the way it displays the signal through composite, it's giving you these weird graphical anomalies, like noise on the screen, and it's such fine noise at 1080p that apparently that's too much for the processing. So, and it's not a CPU issue, which I just found out, because I thought it might be causing my CPU usage to go way up. Like, I don't know if you saw my text a minute ago, Luke, where I tried to switch to X264 and it went from like 20% to like 80%, and like every frame was being dropped. It was like, oh, that's not going to work. But, using the codec that I'm using now seems to be fine. So anyway, I think I fixed the problem. I think I understand what I got to do if I want to play my Sharp Twin and use composite video. I think I get it now. I think I understand the problem. It's not a big deal. I have a separate setup on this for the 4:3 ratio stuff anyway. So I'll just make sure that when I capture 4:3, I change it to 720. When I capture 16:9, switch back to 1080p. No big deal. So anyway, I think I figured out the problem. Born Distract is still testing. I think I've figured it out, Born, because I haven't dropped a single frame since I made this change. So it seems to be resolved. Luke says, yeah, X264 makes my CPU usage extremely high, but I drop no frames now. It makes no sense. Well, I think you have a really good CPU also. This little computer I'm using here is nowhere near as potent as what you got over there. That's probably, I mean, I think you're basically just brute forcing your way through that, because I think X264 is a software encoding codec. I don't think it actually uses any hardware for the encoding. And the codec I'm using is called QuickSync or something like that, and it's definitely using the video hardware to help it. Obviously, because switching to X264 was not a good look for this little bitty computer. Luke says, then occasionally I have to drop to 30 frames from 60 just due to screen tearing. It's annoying. Yeah. Well, hopefully I don't have to do too much else to this because like I said, when I do 1080p stuff with modern consoles or whatever, it seems to be fine. Really, anything seems to be fine except this, except this specific situation. Composite video on a NES or Famicom and certain games at certain moments, because it wasn't dropping it up until certain screens, certain things happening. So it has to be a specific set of circumstances for it to even be a problem. But now with this change, it shouldn't be a problem no matter what. It just seems to be fine now. So, yeah. Now I know. That's a lot less aggravating. I was pretty frustrated with this, but seems to be okay. So anyway, thanks everybody for helping me test stuff and for listening to me carry on and on about this. I appreciate that. So I'm gonna go. I just was trying to do a final test on this to see if I had figured out what was wrong, and who knows, I might do another stream now that I've fixed this, maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow, and play some more of my Sharp Twin in composite video. Yay, composite video. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I have an RGB modded top loader. There's no reason for me to be doing this other than I just want to. So, yeah, thanks, Luke. Thanks, Born Distracted. Papa Pete, Trichome, Pierre, Pharaoh Man, there's so many people that showed up on the previous stream. I appreciate you guys very, very much. And it looks like we're good to go. So that's it. I'm going to stop here and I will catch you guys in the next one. Y'all have a great weekend. Bye-bye.